Welcome back, everyone. This is the long overdue part 2 of Who They Are and Why They Lie. I thank you for your patience as we work to complete this. Had a lot of things going on and some setbacks kept happening, but we're here and ready to get started. And so, for those of you who haven't seen part 1, go back and watch it now. Otherwise, a lot of what we're going to talk about isn't really going to make sense. But for those of you who are ready, we're going to go ahead and get started and just recap what we covered in part 1, which was a little bit of who they are in terms of the key players in the game that they have going on, the deceivers, and some of the connections that they have to the heliocentric model, as well as the history of sun god worship. And so, finding out who they are, a lot of people think that it's all about these different secret societies and people keeping this wisdom, and that's partly true, but that wisdom and that knowledge comes from somewhere. In this battle that we're in, like the word told us, and we've seen this verse many times, that it's not against flesh and blood. So we're going to be looking at the spiritual aspect of this warfare because that's where it originated. We're going to go all the way back to creation and then start moving forward from there. So it's going to be some deeper subjects in terms of the spiritual realm. But the word, I'm going to read this verse real quick. It tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. Most of us heard this verse growing up and how to protect yourself by putting on the whole armor of the Father. However, we didn't know how serious this spiritual warfare was because, for the most part, I know I'm speaking for myself here, I had no clue what these powers of darkness were, where they got their wisdom, what their plans were, and how much they had deceived the world. And waking up to the truth about creation and how well the powers of darkness have hid it from the entire world really opens your eyes to the fact that they are desperate and they are actually quite wise. And so, where do these powers of darkness come from? We have to analyze that because there is no way mankind could do the things they're doing on their own. We don't live long enough to figure that much out. The people who are doing this are working directly, hand in hand, with the influences of these powers of darkness. That's why the oaths that we looked at in part 1 were so serious. These things show you that they are binding themselves. You even see the word binding right here to these penalties if they are to break their secrecy and become one of us. It's a serious offense, and so they bind themselves, they swear these oaths, and you can go back and watch it if you forgot what those were, because I'm not going to read those graphic words, the things that they agree, especially in the Jesuit oath, to do to the heretics. It is so sad, the things that they speak out loud when they are becoming one of these members. And so they have to be devout, but that wording, like I said, relates to the wisdom of the fallen, because when you go back to the book of Enoch and you learn what the fallen were doing, the very first thing they did was they swore an oath, and they used the exact same terminology, binding ourselves right there. And so every time you sign a contract, you'll hear them say, "This is a binding contract." This is something that we borrowed from the wisdom of the fallen, these binding oaths and contracts, where they are binding themselves to a mission and agreeing to suffer the consequences together. If one of them goes down, they all do. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this oath that I'm looking at here, this is from the book of Enoch. I highly suggest you read it. It's extremely fascinating, the things you hear, and it fills in a lot of the missing pieces that answers the questions as to how the world became so corrupt before and after the flood. And we're going to be looking at both of those aspects, before and after. This is before the flood and before the world became as corrupt as it was and needed to be cleansed. And so the watchers came down to Mount Hermon, and this is their pact, or their oath. It says, "Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves," just like the Masonic oath, "by mutual imprecations," or that word just means spoken curse, "not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing." And so they all swore, it tells us, and they bound themselves together by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200. who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And so that was what they were doing, binding themselves for a purpose. And it doesn't tell you what that purpose was. It just says that they plan to do this thing. And so, what was this thing they were mentioning here in the oath? Well, all you have to do is look back at what happened after they made this oath, and they began corrupting all flesh and doing this in many different ways. They taught us all sorts of things like how to make weapons of war. And now that you have these weapons of war, what is the egos of men going to do? Go out, conquer, murder, kill, do all the things that are against the Father's commands: godlessness, fornication, enchantments, root cutting, astrology, lawlessness, things that are returning now, things that are really big in the world and promoted, like the smiting of infants in the womb. We call it abortion now. It's not a new trick, it's something the enemy's been using for a long time. And so, revealing eternal secrets, which they thought they had all of the deep ones, but they didn't. There were things they did not know, and the Father kept from them for a reason, so that the events you see later on with the Messiah could happen. But they revealed eternal secrets to mankind. And it says here, which men were striving to learn. They wanted to know these things. When you look at the New Age religions and things going on now, people are wanting to learn that. They see it as this great wisdom, and it is wisdom, but it's the wisdom of the fallen, and it's meant to cause you to perish. It is not good for you to be lured in by that. But just like in the garden, that cunning serpent knew how to get Eve to break what the Father had commanded them. And what was it about the lie the snake told that made them want to eat of this fruit? Well, it was that same wisdom luring them in. You're going to be wise if you do this. And the serpent even said, because God knows that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So this was that lure pulling you in. Oh, you're going to be so wise. You're going to know good and evil. Right now, you just know good. And so that tempting was there. She gave in, and then Adam gave in. And in that day, he died. And I remember reading that and thinking, you know, Adam didn't die the next day. He woke up, and he moved on. He had kids. All these things happened. He didn't die that day. So why did the Father tell him he would if he ate of this fruit? Well, Jubilees, just to give some of you an answer that have had that same question, in chapter 4 answers this really well. It says, and he lacked 70 years of 1,000 years. This is when he died. So when he died, he lacked 70 years of 1,000 years. For 1,000 years are as one day in the testimony of the heavens. And therefore was it written concerning the tree of knowledge, on the day that ye eat thereof ye shall die. For this reason he did not complete the years of this day, for he died during it. To me, that makes a lot of sense. So he did not complete that day. And if you look at the timeline we're on now, with 1,000 years being a day, or a day 1,000 years, it's interesting because we're approaching the seventh day, which is significant if you've read the creation story. So, a really cool way to look at it there. But that was sort of the first downfall of man. But the wisdom of the fallen we're talking about comes from those watchers, and they corrupted the entire world. Like we said earlier, we needed a flood. And I say the entire world, there was Noah and his family. Those were the only ones that made it out. And so, how did that wisdom of the fallen return? You have a flood, clean start, everything should be good, right? I would think so. However, there are several ways the wisdom of the fallen returned, and one of those has to do with what they produced when they were here. Because when they were in the world and they were disclosing these things, they taught them to their sons. Who are their sons? That's a big deal. So we're going to take another look back in the book of Enoch at what it tells us they did around the time they were making the pact that we looked at. It says, and the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, talking about women, and said to one another, come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants. And so that right there is referencing their sons. This becomes what would later be called their beloved, but it says their sons as a punishment for what they did when they corrupted the world would have to slay each other. And so it says here, and when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, talking about their sons, their beloved sons, bind them fast for 70 generations. So the fallen were to be bound up, and it says, in the valleys of the earth till the day of their judgment, and of their consummation till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. So they were bound up. That's why I was asking the question, how did the wisdom return? Well, they taught their wisdom to their sons. What happened to their sons? I thought they just killed themselves and destroyed each other. Sort of a Rob Skiba called it a clash of the titans, and it's what a lot of Greek mythology is most likely based on, the clash of these titans here. So these giants who were produced from the spirits and flesh, it says, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they are born from men and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on the earth. So when you hear about these evil spirits tormenting mankind, that's their origin. They are angry. Their punishment was to slay each other in this battle while their parents watched them. And so they went from being these massive, destructive creatures to now destroying each other, and then their spirits lived on. And when it tells us what these evil spirits actually do now, it says, and the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. They are against our Creator. They are against us. They know that the relationship with Him, what that does for us, and they are against Him. And so, after seeing the goals of these evil spirits, it makes sense, given that they were teaching these secret things by the Watchers, that they would continue on that legacy. That's why right now we're seeing the corrupting of all flesh 2.0, because that same wisdom is being shared. You can see it with creation. When you compare the two, the wisdom of the fallen is still there, and it is a lie. It's the wisdom that eliminates the Father and the Son. And we were warned about that when we look back at 1 John. It tells us exactly the goals of these spirits of the Antichrist. There was many of them back then, it says, and they essentially deny the Father and the Son. So that's their goal. We know where they get their wisdom. And so the best way in the modern world to deny the Father and the Son is to replace them with a big bang, some sort of random accident, eliminating the Father's creation model, trying to eliminate Him. And you think, this globe could be this really miraculous model. I mean, it's a pressurized ball in a vacuum. Yeah, that's pretty cool, but the story they give behind that, the words that they use to name that model, the numbers that they have buried deep within it, all of these paint a different picture, because the Word, according to the wisdom of the Father, our world is created. It's immovable. It has a firmament that's mentioned as the only structure that took an entire day to create. And it's the second day of creation. It's a big deal. And so all of this wisdom and the contrasting wisdom is why these unclean spirits would use people who are devout, taking oaths, just like the Watchers did. They learned from them. They saw that. They have copied that. And so that is why all of the things you see with these secret societies, is the way it is. It's a secret, and it's not for your good. I just happened to stop by the Georgia Guidestones the other day. It was on my way home, and my wife saw a sign and said, "Hey, it's only 8 miles away. Let's stop by there and look at them." These things, as you can see, it looks like they do blood sacrifices here. They tell you the plan that they have in plain sight. That's why everybody freaks out and goes there. But up until recently, no one knew who made these things, who set them up like that, who funded it. Well, it was secret societies. Two of those secret societies are known. One of them happens to be the Masons, the other was the Rosicrucians, and they all share a same goal according to these stones because they are wanting us to maintain this population of under 500 million, which would involve them doing a lot of destruction to get there, and that's why people freak out when they see these things. But they are set in place where they are based on the sun's location because it ties in to sun god worship. Whoever put these up knows that the world is stationary. That's why there's a hole drilled into this thing where you can see the pole star, Polaris, the North Star, year round. If you look through this hole, it's a massive stone with a little tunnel bored through it, and you can see that star all year round. And the sun, which is part of that perfect clock set in place at creation in the firmament, is going around and showing us noon every day of the year based on how they set this thing up. It's really crafty how they did it, but they are again are using the wisdom of the fallen to plan these things, to do these things. And like my dad says, they might be able to set these stones up, but our Father has the last say. He wins in the end. He gathers us up, and his son will return yet again. And so before that happens, there's a lot of things that are going to go down. The spiritual warfare is going to increase. I'm hearing from a lot of truth seekers that it is just ramping up in their lives. They are getting discouraged. They are under full blown attack. We've experienced some of the same things here. That's why it's taken us so long to get part two out. But the persecution is not that bad yet where we are. I know it's going to get worse. Just take joy in that. It's hard to say that. But the warfare is real. And these powers of darkness we were told about are doing the things that we were warned about, and that is why we see the things we see when we look at those who rule over us. They put those symbols everywhere. And like the book of Jubilees told us in the very beginning, that they will make to themselves high places and groves and graven images, and they will worship each his own graven images so as to go astray, and they will sacrifice their children to demons and to all the works of the error of their hearts. And so they have done exactly that. They even call the place where all the world powers go Bohemian Groves. It is a grove. They're graven images. They even put those graven images in the layout of their domains where they rule over the rest of us and create these phony titles and powers and authorities that everybody submits to. But they do things the way they do for spiritual reasons. That's why there's a broken pentagram right there in the middle of DC. I hate even having this stuff up on the screen because it is demonic. It's of these unclean spirits. That's why they do what they do. That's who they are getting their wisdom from. And that's why when you see the world powers agreeing on something peacefully, it's always something that keeps us in their lies and our minds separated from the truth. And the first two that were a red flag to me when looking into this were keeping Antarctica safe from private exploration. Nothing to see there. They're just studying ice for decades peacefully, but they signed a treaty. And it's one of those things that all world powers did peacefully, and it's been that way throughout the Cold War and every conflict since. But the second thing that they do peacefully occurred at around the same time. They tried to pretend there was some sort of race, and then it was like, okay, now we all get along. Now that America's gone to the moon, and they still just smiling, happy faces, and that's all you see. No matter how long you keep them locked in a tin can, they are just the happiest people out there. And those two things were the two main things until recent times that the world powers worked together with. And now, of course, we have Revelation 18:23, where they are deceiving the world with pharmakia, and they're doing so intensely. If they weren't so intense with it, it wouldn't be such a red flag to everyone. But they are all unified, putting out the same messages, telling the same lies over and over again. And we're not even allowed to question it here. That's why we don't talk about it very much anymore. But the powers that shouldn't be are unified in three things, and they aren't doing so based on their own will. It is the will of those unclean spirits, and prophecies must be fulfilled. We know who wins in the end. Trying to corrupt all flesh is not going to work out for them. It's not going to save them. And for those of you who are waking up to this, be thankful that we have a way out. The Father is calling us out of Babylon and out of Egypt yet again. And it's time to turn to Him and use that example He gave us with His Son to do His will. And when you're in those situations where you're about to endure persecution and you don't want to, but it's inevitable, just say those same words that we were taught by the Messiah when He lived out the example He gave us and said, "Thy will be done." Because it's the toughest thing we can say sometimes. A lot of you right now are having to say that in order to do the right thing. So pray for those who are enduring the persecution. A lot of the people I know in Canada that we are hearing from suffering, wars breaking out as we speak. Just pray for those people. And, iron sharpens iron, they say. Keep building each other up. We need to really be here for each other in these last days because these times are serious, as you can see, and it's time to pursue learning and understanding what we're up against, because if we don't, we're not going to be as serious about putting on that full armor. And that full armor, as we are told, that what's important with that armor above all is taking that shield of faith. And faith means trust. And I'm speaking from experience. When the Father healed me, the last words I was able to speak before His power just consumed me and His love and His mercy and His grace overwhelmed me, the last words I said was, "I trust you." And after I spoke those words, He lifted me up, healed my broken heart, showed me why I was hurting, and just restored so much clarity. Everything made sense. It was just this peace and love that I can't comprehend or put into words. When they say joy unspeakable, that's what it is. You can't speak about it. You want people to experience. All of those of you out there who are hurting and being lied to by these unclean spirits that you're worthless, that the Father doesn't want time with you, those are lies. So ignore those lies of these unclean spirits. Go outside. Know that the same Father who put that firmament where it is on day 2 and created this world wants time with you. And we have free will. He's given us that. Bad things are happening. And it's all because we chose death and these unclean spirits are at work. So stay prepared. Put on that full armor. Know what we're up against, and I hope you guys receive this well. I know it's a lot to take in, but we'll be back soon with some hopefully live hangouts with some guests that I want to share their work and just have you guys answer questions and learn with and study with. But thank you for your patience. I love you guys. You guys are awesome. Stay safe and stay ready.